Today I'm going to review with you how to solve a quadratic by factoring. All right, example number 1, 2x squared minus 9x minus 2 equals 3. The very first step, very important step, is to make sure your quadratic equals 0 before you factor it. So in this case, our quadratic equals 3. So in order to make it equal 0, I need to subtract 3 from both sides. Now you'll notice on this quadratic there's a like term over here, a -2. So I need to combine those together. So I'm going to get 2x squared minus 9x minus 5 equals 0. Now the second thing you want to check is make sure that your quadratic's in standard form. So standard form means you have the highest exponent on the variable, x squared, to the lowest. So here's an x squared, here's x to the 1, this is an x to the 0, so we don't write it. So I'm ready to start factoring it so I can solve it. Now remember, when you factor, you can use any strategy you want. I'm going to remind you or do an example of the rectangle diamond strategy. So with the rectangle diamond strategy, you put your first term, 2x squared, in one corner, and then diagonally from that you put your third term. So take a look at that. We have our 2x squared and our -5. So the only thing we're missing in this rectangle is we need these other two boxes to add up to -9x. So if these two have to add up to -9x, we put that on the bottom of our diamond, -9x it has to add up to, and it has to multiply to be this product here. So 2x squared times -5 is -10x squared. We are going to write that right up here, -10x squared. So now I must find two terms that multiply to be -10x squared and add to be -9x. So I'm going to think about things that multiply to be -10, a 10 times a -1, a -10 times a 1. I'll start there. Do either one of those add up to -9? Yes, they do, this one. So I'm going to put -10x and a 1x over here. Then I'm going to move those right into my rectangle. And I need to change that to a positive. My bad. All right, now we need to find the actual factors that make up this quadratic. So when I look at this column right here, what do they have in common? They have a 2 and an x in common. So I'm going to start with that. 2x times x and 2x times -5 will give me the -10x. X times 2x is 2x squared. X times 1 is the 1x. So it looks like my factors are going to be x minus 5 times the quantity 2x plus 1. But look above to our problem. We just factored that quadratic. What does it equal? It equals 0. We don't want to forget that. So we've successfully factored our quadratic. Now we need to use the zero product property, the ZPP. So we set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. Either this factor has to equal 0 or this one, so that when we multiply those two things together, we always get a 0. This one we would add 5 to both sides and get x equals 5. This one we would have to subtract 1. 2x equals -1 and divide by 2. And we're going to get x equals -1/2. So our two answers to our original problem are 5 and -1/2. If I put a 5 in for x, I will get a 3. If I substitute a -1/2 in for x, I should get a 3. All right, let's try a second example. It's just a teeny bit different. My first step, when I want to set it equal to 0, I would need to add x to both sides, because that's the opposite of the -x. There's nothing over here to combine it with. That's okay. So what we'll do is we'll just bring down our three different terms. We have a 6x squared, we have an x, and we have a -2 equals 0. All right, so do we have it in standard form, highest exponent to the no exponent at all here that you can see. So I didn't put the plus x at the end. I wanted my x squareds, then my x's, then my minus 2. Now you can start your rectangle. The 6x squared goes here, the negative 2 goes there. And then remember, these two have to add up to x. So they add up to x, they multiply to be negative 12x squared. So I need to start thinking of factor pairs that make a negative 12, like a 1 times a negative 12, a 2 times a negative 6, a 3 times a negative 4. None of these seem to be giving me a positive number. What if I try negative 1 times 12, negative 2 times 6, and negative 3 times 4? So you got to consider all possibilities till you find one that adds up to 1. So I'm going to go with a negative 3x and a 4x. And then we'll move those into our rectangle. I'm going to look at this column here. What do they have in common? These two terms have a 3 and an x in common. And so then I need to multiply by 2x. A 3x times what gives me negative 3x? Negative 1. And over here, how can I get an area of 4x when I have a 2x? I need to multiply by 2. So my factors are 2x minus 1 times the quantity 3x plus 2. And don't forget what it equals. It equals 0. So now we can use the ZPP, the zero product property. Set this one equal to 0 and this one equal to 0. And then we can solve. We will add 1 and 2x equals 1, divide by 2, and x equals 1/2. This one we subtract 2 from both sides, and 3x will equal negative 2. And then divide by 3, and x equals negative 2/3. So we have found 2 x solutions that will work in our original problem up here and make a true statement. All right. You can email Mrs. Kelly or myself with any questions that you have. Good luck and have a great week.